What about another team I actually want to talk about in this tournament? Because I actually just found how deep they made it quite impressive, even though they ended up losing, like, in the case of, like, some of the matches, like, maybe people thought they had no chance, is Astralis. Because obviously, after the device departure, not only was he their star player, but he was their AWPer as well. And even though, look, it was never as drastic as it seemed. Like, Dupree has obviously been a pretty competent AWPer throughout his career any time he's done it. In fact, if people remember, when they did that first ever blast, which was at the time Device actually had to, like, take a couple of tournaments off, famously, that's where they were, like, one round from winning the tournament and beating the SK team with Dupree as the main AWPer. So he's certainly a competent player. But there's another one where, like, it's understandable why people just, like, bailed completely, because Device leaving made most people think, who cares? Like, Astralis is not relevant. They're not going to win anymore. And, like, I've noticed they're clearly not, like, an elite team. Like, I don't think they're going to win any tournaments, but they're way better than you'd expect. Like, the name value on paper does somehow still translate to something in the server. What do you think about Astralis at the moment, Vince?
No, I agree. I think when Device kind of went across the nip, I was worried that they were just going to not necessarily slip into obscurity, but they'd be like a top 15, 20 team maybe towards the lower end of top 10. I think Bubsky still needs a little bit more time to kind of factor into this team and cement his place. I've been a little bit disappointed with Magisk's performance personally, though, because at one point that guy was absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, for sure.
And he seems to have dropped off considerably. I'm not sure if it's a case of they're finding their way, they're putting the pieces of the jigsaw back in, because when you lose a player of Device's stature, let's be honest, it has reverberating effects across the entire roster. Like having a star AWPer go elsewhere, Dupree, who is typically a very aggressive rifler, sometimes is just an all-out entry fragger, him now picking up the AWP, that's going to have significant impacts on the rest of the teammates and where they play. So I think Device leaving was a big crushing blow, maybe more so than people realized, and Astralis are trying desperately to pick up the pieces. But I definitely echo your sentiments there, Duncan. I didn't think they'd get to like the last 3 or 4 teams. I thought they'd probably finish 6th or 7th, somewhere around that. So I've been quite impressed with them.
What do you think, Legear?
Actually, first of all, I'm super happy that it had this outcome that Device actually left, because I was super sad to see these kind of players having these big struggles. And sure. I just think like it's always good to have like a new start in your career, a fresh start, fresh motivation, and I think it's going to play for both parts a good role. And in general, I think like about Magisk, I think he started like dropping off his numbers whenever he started like taking over the in-game leading. I think over from Glaive when he took a break, and he still doesn't seem to have like found his perfect game. But I think it's good also because they have now this change, everything. They can reevaluate everything and do the roles, like set the roles new. And we will see. I see very promising results from them. I think they also, like you said, they still have a Glaive, they have a Zipnix, they have a Magisk. They still have like one of the very, very best player Counter-Strike has ever seen. So I think they will bounce back from that. And I'm actually happy to see how they're going to perform in future. And as you said, like they already had promising results. I also didn't expect them to get this far in this tournament, to be fair. But we also have to say, like Bubsky, there's a reason why he got taken into Astralis, and he really didn't have like actually the chance to show what he can do. Plus, you have to think he was getting used in a time where the team was pretty much dead and like probably had to fight through very many obstacles. And it's also hard for him to perform in this case. And I think it's a good time for him also to see how he's going to perform and how he's going to show his skill.
Yeah, a couple of things that you said that I'd touch on is, like, first of all, on the angle that, in theory, you would look at the names. Like, that's the interesting thing to me, is because on paper, if someone this is why you know that, like, fans do ride way too hard, like, narratives and, like, results. Because how can everyone tell me that every player in Astralis is the greatest at their role, and then one leaves and they're like, well, that whole team's done, chuck it in the bin. It's like, by your logic, I've still got the best IGL, the best support player, the best you've got some of the best still. So on paper, like, obviously, the idea you're going to be as great as the older stars, well, that's ridiculous because no one knows if anyone could be. No one even knows if the older stars could be anymore. But you look at the names on paper, and if you're Glaive, you should still be able to look at this and go, I've still got a fucking team of players here. Like, if on paper I said, like again, if we go off the old form, if we go before we went to the online period, if I told you can make a Danish team tomorrow and you start with Glaive as your IGL, Zipnix as your support, as star players, you can have Magisk, Dupree, and then you can work in a young player and Bobsky, like, that's a fucking banging lineup. Like, it has to obviously, all the pieces have to fit, you have to develop it, yeah, but like, that on itself could be like a top 5 team in the world. Like, those are legit players, especially the Magus gang. I agree. Because one of the cool things for me about when Astralis was at their peak was, yeah, Device used to win all the MVPs, because like, numbers-wise, he'd have like the best stats, but it was basically between like Magus and Dupree, like, who was actually the second best player most of the time. Like, those are 2 sick players. The only issue is, I agree, the Magus angle, I feel like this is where people don't, you have to give like extra leeway to this player, because first of all, we've already seen it with a lot of players in the game, that if they try becoming the in-game leader, they just drop off some of their individual like star power or whatever, because they have to think differently about the game. But it's also different because people might think like, yeah, but he was only doing that temporarily. That's what people probably don't understand. Technically, he might not even have known that, because this was the time when Glaive had to like leave because he was burned out and take that medical sort of like break. But if people don't know, as reported by me and Richard, that was also behind the scenes where there was all sorts of fuckery and back and forth, and would players join, or would they join a different team, or maybe the whole lineup was going to be sold to someone else. So actually, if you're Magisk and you're Zonic in that scenario where you know Glaive's not in your lineup, you actually have to sort of prepare as though maybe he never comes back. So I could imagine there was a world where, because we heard that story, if you remember, that even when Glaive initially came back, they actually won the Pro League title with Magisk still IGLing, even though Glaive was playing. Like, he actually didn't instantly become the IGL. That suggests to me they essentially might have told Magisk, just play it as if you are the in-game leader from now on, and maybe he was doing like an MSL and he was just trying to be like, right, I'm just the IGL from now on. So if you go that deep into that and you've done months of being the in-game leader, I could imagine it's pretty hard to just come back and then supposedly just brain wipe yourself and just be the player you used to be years earlier. And this is a different lineup as well. Remember, now you don't have a device. I'm sure it's thrown everything off. Because one of the other things I always think about like really great lineups is, it's like a secret of teamwork in general. The best team usually isn't just that you've got the best players. It's that like, say us 3 were in a team, then the ideal scenario is like my strength maybe covers a little bit of Vince's weakness, and then his strength covers a bit of Legia's weakness, and then his strength, you know what I mean? Like, that's the perfect team, because then that's why you end up looking like Astralis. You look like you got no flaws. You do. Spoiler, everyone has flaws. But when you've all got amazing teammates like that, it can cover it. You look like you're the unbeatable machine that they were. So I still think personally it's pretty cool they're just in the mix still, because I actually would be a bit, I know it must be hard to reset your expectations to like, we're probably not going to win the tournament, but when you're as great as some of those players are, I don't want them to just quit because they don't have the old lineup. Like, you got to still fight and prove. Like, if anything, by the way, and here's one thing I will say: if they ever managed even to fluke win a tournament in the next few months, that just makes Glaive even more legendary. If you do that without the guy who won all the MVPs, that's what you fight for, mate. There's a brilliant angle in itself to battle for. So I think it's pretty cool that they were in the mix here. Like, put it this way, they placed ahead of some teams I would have had, like Complexity, all sorts of teams that they were in the mix with. They finished the same placing as Big. Like, this is pretty legit. Look at these teams they're playing against. These are teams that are usually in the mix. Obviously, ahead of Vitality.